Hi, I'm Josie from Fabric Godmother, and today I'm going to show you how to easily insert a concealed zip. A concealed zip is a special kind of zip that once inserted doesn't show from the outside. The only bit that's visible is this little zipper pull at the top. Plus, if your garment has a waist seam, I'm going to show you a clever little trick to make sure that waist seam always lines up. This is your concealed or invisible zip. I'm just going to show you some of the parts of the zip. So either side you've got this tape, that's the zip tape. At the top here, this is the zip pull, and when the zip is inserted into your garment, that's going to be the only bit that shows. At the top here as well, there's two little bits of plastic, and these are the zip stops, and they're going to stop the zip pull from being pulled off the top of the tape when it's closed. And if I turn it over here, you can see the teeth of the zip. And on an invisible or concealed zip, they curve round to the back of the zip, helping to hide it when it's inserted into the garment. At the other end of the zip, there's another stop that stops the zip ball being pulled off the end of the zip when you open it. Here are the two different zipper feet that we're going to use today. This is a standard zipper foot and this is a concealed zipper foot. Yours might not look exactly like this depending on the model of your machine. They may look slightly different, but there are a couple of things that will always be the same. So on a standard zipper foot, you have two places where the foot can attach to your machine depending on which side of the zip you're sewing. And on an invisible zipper foot, on the bottom, there'll always be two grooves that the teeth of the zipper will end up running along when you're sewing. So going back to the standard zipper foot, you clip it onto your machine, and if you were sewing here, the needle would run a row of stitching alongside the teeth, not right up against it, but just next to it, which is absolutely fine for sewing in a standard zip. But when you're sewing a concealed zip, you want this line of stitching to be right underneath the teeth that have curled back, and that's what's going to make it invisible. So the teeth will sit in the groove on the bottom of the foot like this. And what the foot does is it actually opens up the teeth as the zip is fed through. And the stitching happens through a tiny little hole in the foot here. And that means that the stitching is right next to the teeth on the invisible zip. Before you pin the zip to your fabric, you're going to need to make sure that you finish the raw edge of your fabric that's going to run alongside the zip. Then, making sure your fabric is right side up, turn your zip over so the teeth are showing and the right side is at the bottom. Open up your zip and lay it on the fabric like this. If your seam allowance is 15 millimeters, you need to measure 17 millimeters, so add on 2 from the top of the fabric to where the teeth stop lie. Then, reduce your measure to 15 millimeters, the size of the seam allowance, and measure in from the edge of the fabric to the teeth 15 millimeters. Pin in place. Ensuring that you keep 15 millimeters away from the edge all the way down, pin down the zip tape all the way. Using a needle and thread, hand baste your zip into place. Now we're going to sew the zipper onto your garment. So I'll just line that up here. Then if I lower the foot, okay, you can see that the teeth have gone into one of the grooves on the zipper foot. And as we start to sew, you'll notice that the foot opens out the teeth of the zipper as we're sewing to get the stitching really close. As we're sewing towards the end of the zip, you're not going to be able to sew past the zipper stop here. So we're going to stop just in front and backstitch. I'll show you. So if you stop at this point, just before you reach the end, and reverse your stitch. Once you've attached the first side of your zip, you're going to need to close the zip up to around halfway between the waist seam and the top of the dress. Then get the other side of the dress and with the right sides together, place them like this. Open up the zip so it's ready to pin on this side. Starting at the top, Use your measure again to measure 17 millimetres down from the top for the top of the teeth zip stop, and then 15 millimetres in for the teeth from the edge of the dress. Pin the zip in place at the top. Then move to the waist seam. So make sure that you line up the two waist seams and take a bit of time getting them nice and matched up. And once again, making sure that the teeth are 15 millimetres away from the edge of the fabric. Pin in place there. I always think it's worth at this point opening up and just double checking that you've really got those seams nicely matched up. Once you're happy that your waist seams are lined up, you can undo the zipper and pin the tape into place from the top to the bottom. Once it's pinned, get your needle and thread and hand baste it into place again. Now we've basted the zip into place, we're actually going to machine baste across the waist seam here to really make sure that we get those waist seams nicely lined up. So first of all, you're going to want to change your zipper foot to a normal zipper foot, and then you're going to change the stitch length to a much longer stitch length. And then just sewing across this bit here, double checking that you've really got those seams nicely matched up. Don't forget to change back your stitch length and your zipper foot. Now we've basted the zip across the waist seam, we're going to attach the zipper to the second side. So starting at this waist seam, you're going to put the zip into the foot and we're going to sew down to the end. Because we've got the zip tape on the left this side, it's actually the right hand groove that we're using on the zipper foot. So when you've got it in place like that, we're going to sew down to the bottom, once again stopping just before you get to the zip end. Now you're going to swivel the dress round, and this time you're going to start from the waist seam and go up to the top. And this time you see the zipper teeth are in the left hand groove. Remove all your basting stitches. Now that you've inserted your concealed zip and removed the basting stitches, the next thing we need to do is to close up the bottom of the zip. So to do that, we're going to match up our seam allowances with the right side of the fabric facing and pop a pin in just above the bottom of the zip. And then what I like to do is get the very ends of the zip and just make them so they poke up outside of the seam allowance and pin that in place. And what that's going to do is it's going to hold them out of the way while you're sewing your seam allowance along here. So just make sure they don't get caught. And for this bit, we're just going to sew from the notch here back up towards the end of the zip to close it off. And you possibly will not be able to get right up to the end of the stitching here because of the end of the zip being in the way, but we're going to get as close as we can. So we're going to swap back to the zipper foot and pop it on this side, and then I'm going to move my needle over to the furthest right position that it will go. And then remembering that you've got a 1.5 centimetre or 15mm seam allowance and allowing for the moved over needle position, you might want to just see where the fabric needs to go. So making sure you've still got a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. We're going to sew up in a straight line towards the stitching that you had at the end of the zip. As I said, you may not get all the way to where you were, but you want to get as close as possible as you can.